All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Sorry, having some technical difficulties this morning. Not exactly sure what's going on, but all right. Anyway, let's begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Beis, to thank the Schwarzman family for dedicating all of the Shemar Drushos this month in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef ben Meir Zichron Livracha, Leah Sol and the schus of our daughter Ilana Bas Esther's successful surgery, the complete refuah shalema, and for the safe return of all of our hostages and the hatzlach of our soldiers. Maya Hoffman, in memory of her father Reuven ben Emmanuel Zichron Livracha, and on the merit of Hatzlacha, health, and joy for all of her family. And Yoel and Sarah Kelman in honor of the birth of their son, and in memory of Staff Sergeant David Sasuna Shem Yikom Dama. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all those who need a refuah, should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Our hostages and Mir Hashem should be returned home, and our soldiers should be successful. B'chol Maasei Yedehem. But so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Lamed 30, and we are picking up a Mir Hashem on Chav Tes Amud Beis, 20 lines up from the bottom. L'china mafkid sefer Torah eitzel chavero. So remember, again, we're speaking about the idea, the halachos concerning if you find the sefer Torah, you find the sefer, a scroll form, what are you allowed to do, what are you not allowed to do? So the Gemara, remember again, we quoted a long brisa yesterday, and then the Gemara quoted the case if a person deposits a sefer Torah with someone else for safekeeping, gololo kol shnei masar chodesh, so you roll it once every 12 months, poscho v'korebo. Ultimately, again, you could open it up and read from it. So the Gemara says, Maya videte gabe, what do you mean that you're allowed to open it up and read it? In other words, let's say generally, when you're depositing something with someone, so it's for safekeeping. It's not halacha l'maisa for any type of use. So what's the pshat? The Gemara says, V'su, im b'shvilo pascha aser. Furthermore, again, if it's true, as we said before, that you can never use the item for your own benefit, ha'amrit poscha v'korebo. You just said that when you deposit the Sefer Torah with an individual, he's allowed to open it up and read it. So what's going on over here? This is what it means to say, Im kishu gololo poscha v'korebo mutter, im b'shvilo pascha aser. What it means is like this: since you have an obligation to safeguard the Sefer, so halacha l'maisa, again, halacha l'maisa, if you go ahead and you open it up and you read it. So if you're doing it for your own purposes, that's asur. But if in the course of caring for the sefer, you open it up and you learn it and you read it, then that is mutter as well. In line of what we learned before. Simcha says, B'chadash shloshim yom b'yashan shnei masar chodesh. So Simcha says, depending on the type of sefer it is, will determine on the level of upkeep that is required. If it's a new sefer, then it needs to be rolled once every 30 days. If it's an old sefer, once every 12 months. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Echazeh v'echazeh shnei masar chodesh. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says whether it's a new sefer or an old sefer, once every 12 months. The Gemara Rabbi Elazar hainu Tanakama. So Rabbi Elazar is saying the same thing as the Tanakama. Ela ima Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer echad zeh v'echazeh shloshim yom. Notice what does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov say? Both a new sefer and an old sefer require rolling once every 30 days. Aval lo yomo bo b'tchilav lo yikra ya'acher ima. Supposed to remember again, the Mishnah said that when you find the sefer, so what can't you do? You can't learn something new for the first time inside of that sefer, because there's a concern that you're going to spend a bit too much time, with the sefer open, since it's a brand new topic. Nor can you have someone else learn with you. What's the concern of someone else learning with you? The pulling of the scroll in different directions, two people together, can cause it to rip. Says the Gemara, Orminu, lo yikra parsha v'yishna, v'lo yikra bo parsha v'yitargim, v'lo yiftach bo yoser megimel dapin. So also the Brisa said, when looking in the sefer and when learning in the sefer, you should only learn something once. You shouldn't learn something and review it, right? You shouldn't learn something and translate it. These are all things which would cause the sefer or require the sefer to be opened for a prolonged amount of time. Furthermore, never open up the scroll more than 3 columns. V'lo yikaru bo shlosha b'nei adam b'krach echad. And nor can you have 3 people learning from 1 column. So the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Hashnayim korin. That what you see from here is that halacha l'maisa sounds like 2 people can learn from the Sefer at the same time. Rabbi says it's not a contradiction. One is talking about in two topics, one is talking about in one topic. What does this mean? So we'll say what you can't have is two people learning from the same topic, i.e. the same column. That's where there's a concern that what's going to happen. They're both trying to see the same thing. So because they're both trying to see the same thing, what's going to happen? They're going to end up pulling the scroll in different directions, and you can end up ripping it. If, however, they are looking at two different columns, that means the Sefer could be open. Not three columns, because you can't have a Sefer open that far, but two columns. You could open it up a little bit, then halacha l'maisa, that is mutter, because again, we're not worried about any type of ripping that may occur in the Sefer. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Furthermore, again, if you find an article of clothing, you have to shake it out. You have to shake it out once every 30 days. The Gemara says, "L'meimra dinir malila." Is that to say that shaking something out, that shaking out a garment, is beneficial? Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan said that if halacha l'maisa, if you have a weaver living inside your house, then halacha l'maisa, you could shake out the weave, you could shake out the garment every single day. It wasn't letting me edit the daf number. I don't know why. So the Gemara says, see, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, going ahead and it didn't work. Going ahead and shaking out a garment every day doesn't work. To which the Gemara says, Amri b'chol yom kashile echel l'shloshim yom malile. The truth is that halacha l'maisa, going ahead and doing it every day is difficult, is not good for the garment, but doing it once every 30 days ultimately is good for the garment. So again, possibility one is shaking out the garment every day is detrimental. Shaking out the garment ultimately, again, once every 30 days is beneficial. Okay? The other possibility is, the Gemara says, other possibility is one is by hand and one is by stick. Meaning what? That shaking it out by hand is beneficial. Kind of hitting it with a stick and causing it to get aired out like that, that's detrimental. The other possibility is lokashya, habida amra, habida kisna. It could also depend on the material of the garment, wool versus linen. Okay, good. Shabbos says, so now what's going to happen over here, since the Gemara quoted Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara is going to quote some other pieces of Rabbi Yochanan, kind of like other pieces of life advice from Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says as follows, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, Kasa de Charshin, velo Kasa de Poshin. This is a fascinating Gemara. It is better to drink a cup of sorcery than it is to drink a lukewarm cup. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Kasa de Charshin, Rashi says, Noach lishtos kos shal machshefos mikos shal mayim poshrin. So it is better to go ahead and drink a cup that literally again was used for incantations, for sorcery, than it is to drink a cup of lukewarm liquid. So apparently lukewarm water is incredibly detrimental. Furthermore, there's only said in a metal utensil, but an earthenware utensil is not a problem. Furthermore, again, even in a metal utensil, that's only if the liquid was never brought to a boil. But if it was brought to a boil, even if it subsequently cooled down, it's not a problem. Furthermore, again, this is only when, let's say, it's just plain water, right? And there were no additives added into it. Aval ditzavis less lanba, but I'm sorry. Aval shada batsiva less lanba. But if there are some additives added into it, ultimately, again, then it's not a problem. He'll say, I was very taken by this Gemara. What is he thinking about this just a moment? What essentially Rabbi Yochanan is saying is the worst thing in life is a cup of lukewarm liquid. Worst, right? He'll say, what's the pshat with something that's lukewarm? What's the pshat with something that's lukewarm? As they say, nishtahin, nishtaher. Right? It's not hot, it's not cold. He'll say, meaning it doesn't take a side. It doesn't identify with anything specific. It's kind of in the middle. It's just floating around. It's not too cold, it's not too hot, it's nothing. It's nothing. Rabbi Yochanan says, you know what? The worst thing in life is a lukewarm cup of water. At least if it's a sorcerer's cup, you know what you're dealing with. You know what it is, and when you know what you're dealing with in life, so you can go ahead and navigate it. The lukewarm cup, it's not aligned with anything. It doesn't stand for anything. It doesn't take a stand principled position this way, that way. It's kind of just in the middle. And I'll say, how many times in life do we take just a tepid, lukewarm approach to existence? I do what I have to do, right? I get by. I don't push myself, right? I don't exert myself. I don't really engage in anything that's all that difficult. I do what I have to do to make it through. Whether it's I do what I have to do to make it through my marriage, I do what I have to do to make it through my career, I do what I have to do to make it through my Yiddishkeit. Everything is lukewarm. It's not hot, it's not cold. Rabbi Yochanan says, terrible. Sometimes in life it's better to crash and burn because you made a mistake, because at least you know where you're holding, rather than to go ahead and be that cup of lukewarm liquid. Because you know the incredible part about being lukewarm? You could be lukewarm for 120 years. You could be lukewarm. Most people, I think, exist in this world as a lukewarm cup of water. You could get by, you could be just fine, but you failed to fully accomplish. Such an incredible Gemara. All right, let's go back there. Rabbi Yochanan, Misha, great Gemara over here. Mishaniach be tziva. I'm sorry, I lost the. Sorry, Rabbi Yochanan, I'm sorry. Mishaniach lo aviv mos harbe. Sorry. Somebody's father left him a large fortune. V'rotze la'abdan, and you want to lose your money. Somebody just said this to me yesterday. They said, if you want to make a big fortune in Eretz Yisrael, what do you need to do? Sorry, if you want to make a small fortune in Eretz Yisrael, what do you need to do? Come with a big one. Right? Come with a big one. Right? So I said, you're not allowed to say stuff like that, because the truth is you're not allowed to say anything negative about Eretz Yisrael in general. Even if it's a joke, you're not allowed to say it. That's the Chet HaMeraglim. Anyway, the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara said, but what happens if your father left you a large amount of money and you want to find a quick way to go ahead and use up all that money? What should you do? Now I will say, by the way, you look at this and you say to yourself, that is the most ridiculous statement in the world, right? Who would ever inherit a large fortune and want to go ahead and squander it? So I will say, just understand that it sounds crazy. We do this every day. Every single morning I wake up, Moda'ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayom, shechazarta bi nishmasi. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you've just given me an incredible fortune. I have an neshama. I have a fresh start. I am b'tselem Elokim. I have a nitzutz Elokim mima al mamish. I have all this stuff. I have a great fortune. And I will say, what do I often do over the course of the day? I squander it. I make this mistake, I do this things that I just don't have to be doing, and decisions that I don't have to be making, and directions I don't have to be going in. And by the time I come to the end of the day, I'm not poor. But what started out as a great day of fortune, unfortunately, so much of that has just been squandered with pettiness, with silliness, with foolishness that didn't need to be done. So I both say, and then if I were to take a step out of myself and recognize how foolish I'm behaving. Why do I get engaged in the small, petty, interpersonal stuff? Why do I go ahead and engage in behaviors that I shouldn't be engaging in? Why do I do the things that I shouldn't be doing? I got such an incredible fortune at the beginning of the day, and now by the end of the day, unfortunately, I've wasted so much of it. It's so incredible about sight. Sometimes, when we look at things outside of ourselves, we're like, oh, that's crazy, that's ridiculous. And then I realize, oh, you know what, I guess I kind of do that as well. Tremendous Moshe. So, if you inherit a lot of money and you want a quick way to go ahead and squander it, what should you do? Number one, Yilbash Bigdei Pishtan, wear linen clothing. Yishtamish Beklis Chuchis, use glass utensils. The Yiskar Polim Val Yisheman, hire workers and don't watch them. Don't oversee them. Now, the Gemara says, what does this mean? Yilbash Beklei Pishtan, Bekisna Romisa. So first of all, the linen clothing is talking about Roman linen, which apparently was very fine, but was used up very quickly. Utilize glass utensils. This white glass, which apparently was very fragile. Hire workers and don't sit with them. Targuma, top of Lamed, Beture dinafish psidaihu. Specifically, a team of oxen. If you hire oxen, you hire a team of oxen. You have a team of oxen and you have workers. So I will say, oxen you have to be very careful with. Rashi points out why. Oxen were often used for plowing, even in vineyards, or in any field though, but Rashi's examples in vineyards. What happens if you don't pay attention to the oxen or to where they're going? They veer off and they could ruin the vines. So not only they're not plowing, but they could destroy the fields. So the idea over here is there are certain types of workers that you really have to babysit, certain types of workers that you really have to be on top of. So we'll say, Sa'alacha Maisa. So I'll say, by the way, what you also begin to see is like each of these also represent different areas of life, right? Your clothing, if you don't oversee, if you don't really pay attention to your gashmias could overtake you, right? Your cup, your glass, perhaps again, that could even refer to your consumption, right? If you're not careful with your consumption, that could go ahead and overtake you. Ultimately, again, the Torah. So it's the same idea also. The oxen also represent like animalistic things, gashmias things. Seems to be that the common theme over here is, if you're not careful with your gashmias in this world, with your clothing, with your glass, and with your oxen, it could easily overtake everything and become the primary pursuit in your life. So you begin with a fortune of ruchnius. Gashmius is beautiful if used in moderation, but if the gashmius ultimately again becomes the primary pursuit of your life, you could go ahead and ruin and lose that entire beautiful fortune. Incredible. So much in today's daf. Let's go back to Aleph 38, second line down. So we'll say, so remember again, what happens if you want to go ahead and you want to air out the garment, right? And you want to go ahead and do it for the benefit of the garment and for your benefit. I was about to say, so it's mutual benefit. So is that permitted? So Tashma, shotcha litzarka. So the Mishnah said, you can air out the garment for the benefit of the garment. Litzarka in, ha litzarka lo. So I will say, for the benefit of the garment, yes, but for my benefit and the garment's benefit, you can't do. So in other words, I will say, sounds like from the Mishnah, mutual benefit is aser. Look at the end of the Mishnah. And the Mishnah says you can't go ahead and utilize the garment for your own honor, for your own benefit. So we'll say, it sounds like, when can't I use the garment? For my own benefit. But if there's mutual benefit, it should be mutter. The truth says, you're right. From the Mishnah itself, you can't really glean any conclusion. So Tashma, lo yishtechena v'lo agabi mita v'lo agabi magud litzarcha. Aval yishtachena agabi mita v'agabi magud litzarcha. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? If you're holding onto a garment, you can't spread it out on the bed or on a peg. Ultimately, again, for your own benefit, but you can do it for the benefit of the garment. Nizdamnu lo orchim. Let's say I have guests who come over. Lo yishtachena v'lo agabi mita v'lo agabi magud. Bein litzarcha. So we'll say, interestingly enough, if I have guests over, I can't spread out the garment on a bed or on a peg, whether it's for my benefit or for the garment's benefit. So the Gemara says, shiny hus, in that case is different. Why? The mikla kalila. Because Rabbi says spreading out the garment when guests are over is going to destroy the garment. How so? Imishum eina, imishum ganvi. Either because of ayin hara, or ultimately again because of it invites theft. In other words, I will say, what you have to be very careful with is, in general, when you have someone over at your house, going ahead and putting stuff out, it could invite ayin hara. We've spoken about ayin hara many times. I will say, what is ayin hara? When I have something that makes someone else feel bad, or I go ahead and display a bracha, or talk about a bracha of mine in a way that makes another person feel deficient, or in a way that makes another person feel sad that they don't have that same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, what do I need to give this bracha to Silber for if he's just using it to make someone else feel bad? HaKadosh Baruch Hu then takes away that bracha. Or, on a more practical level, ganavim, theft. Right? If you're showing something off, either theft through the people who are there, or that word gets out that you have this particular item, and it can lead to theft. Okay? Tashma. So I'll say, so what we're still trying to figure out is like this. Here's what I know. If I have this item, obviously, I'm obligated to go ahead and air it out and do whatever I need to do for the benefit of the garment. Right? That I know. That's number one. Number two, I know that I can't go ahead and put out that garment or shake it out or leave it out for my benefit. What's our question? Mutual benefit. Mutual benefit. Can I go ahead and put out the garment or shake out the garment in a way that benefits me and that benefits the garment? So that's what we're trying to figure out over here. So the Gemara says, Tashma, interesting case here. Hichnisa l'ravka v'dasha kshera. So we'll say, now listen to this. Now Rashi points out over here, talking about the Egla Arufa. Remember again, Egla Arufa is the calf, the decapitated calf. You find the body between two cities. We don't know who killed the individual. You bring a young calf that has never done any work to a dried up riverbed. The elders of the closest city come out and they decapitate the calf, wash their hands over the decapitated calf. Yadenu lo shafchu damzeh. Our hands are clean, our hands right. We do not chas v'shalom cause the death of this person. So we'll say, so obviously, for Egla Arufa to be used, halacha l'maisa, it cannot have been engaged in work. So the Gemara says, Hichnisa Ravka, what happens if you put the calf in a harness, like in a yoke, together with its mother, right? Bishil shatinok. So bishil shatinok v'tido. Sorry, bishvil tashma. Hechnis l'ravka v'dasha kshera. So we'll say if you put the egla arufa, the young calf, in the harness with its mother, in order that the animal should nurse, not to work, or that the animal should nurse. Ultimately, again, it's still kosher. Bishil shatinok v'tidosh pasal. If you put it in the harness so that it should nurse and work, it's pasal. So I will say this is a case of what? Litzarcha, right? I'm putting it in the harness so that it should nurse, right? So that it should nurse. That's litzarcha, right? And litzarcha, and it's also for my benefit because it's threshing, and you see that it's possible. So what do you see from here? Any case of mutual benefit is going to be aser. Tush the Gemara says, no. Shiny hasam da amrakra asher lu ubad ba mikol makom. We'll say egla roof is different. Why? Because the pasuk says you have to use a calf that was not worked. So what you see over here is it cannot have had any work done with it regardless. So once you're going ahead and putting it in that harness and it's threshing, it's aser. If that's the case, hihachi afilu reishanami. If that's the case, so why isn't the first case problematic as well? In other words, case number one is I put it in the harness for the sole goal of nursing, not for any threshing, but it ended up threshing a little bit. So why isn't that problematic? To which as well says very interesting. As Gemara says, ha lo dami ela laha, because that first case is really comparable to this case. This nan shachan ala of kshera. So also listen to this. If you have an egla rufa, and ultimately, again, and halacha l'maisa. This is actually, Gemara is switching gears here a little bit. This is not actually talking about egla rufa. This is talking about paraduma. But the truth is, paraduma and egla rufa have a similar halacha, and that's what? Neither of them could have been worked. If they've been worked, then ultimately, again, they become unfit, puzzle for their particular designation. So listen to this. If you have a paraduma and a bird rested on the back of the paraduma, so ultimately, again, kshera, the animal's still kosher. Now, what's the novelty in that? Even though when the bird lands on the back of the paraduma is supporting its weight, so to speak, nevertheless, it's still going to be kosher. Allah zachar, however, again, if a male animal mated with it, then psula. It's going to be pasul. Now, what's the pshat? So the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, "My taima kidra papa damra papa." Listen to this. Iksiv ubad vikarinan ubad hava amina filo amamela. And I will say, if the pasuk would have said ubad means work was done with it. So if the pasuk would have said ubad and we would have read it as ubad, then what? But say that would mean any work done with the animal. Even if the owner was totally uninvolved, but anything the animal was utilized for would essentially render it unfit. Okay. Iksiv avad v'karinan avad. If the pasuk said avad and we read it as avad means that the owner orchestrated the work. So if it would have been written as avad and read as avad, havamina adda avad ba'ihu. I would have said the animal is only unfit if the owner actively works it. Here's the interesting part. Hashta dichsiv avad vikarinan ubad. So I'll say now that the word is written as avad, which means that the owner works the animal, but it's read as ubad. So avad means, I will say, intentionality, but it's read as ubad, which means if any work is done with it, then what does that mean? It's ubad dumya da'avad. So I will say, in order for the animal to become unfit, it has to be ubad duma da'avad, which means what? Any type of work done with the animal could potentially invalidate it if the owner would have been technically happy with the result. Ma'avad denechale, af ubad denechale. So Rabbi say, just like avad ultimately again means that the owner wants it, so too ubad means that the owner wants it. So Rabbi say, what comes out both for paraduma and egla rufa is like this. Halacha l'maisa, obviously, if the owner intentionally works either of those animals, then halacha l'maisa, it's unfit. It's unfit. If work is done with the animal without the knowledge of the owner, then halacha l'maisa, if it's something that in a regular case the owner would have been happy with, that makes the animal unfit. It's as if there was intentionality. If it's something that the owner wouldn't want or doesn't care about, then that doesn't invalidate the animal. So for example, the bird landing on the back of the animal is not work. Why? Because the owner wouldn't normally care about that. Similarly, again, I will say the act of placing the egla arufa in the yoke with its mother, where the owner's intention is only for the animal to nurse, even though the animal does some threshing, that doesn't invalidate the egla rufa. But yet, again, the male animal having relations with, let's say, the paraduma, would invalidate the animal. Why? Because in a general sense, that would be something that the owner would be happy with. Okay, fine. So I'll just point out over here, the Gemara doesn't seem to resolve the situation yet about mutual benefit. Right? Remember, that was our kasha. So the Gemara doesn't seem to have resolved that yet. Let's go weiter. So we'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah then went through, depending on the object that you find and the material that it's made of, the Gemara gave you guidelines, the Gemara gave us guidelines, ultimately, again, for how to care for the object while it is in my rishos. So, Tanabanan, Hamotzi Kliates, Mishtai Mishem Bishol Shelo Yerkavu. If you find wooden utensils, you could use it in order that it doesn't rot. Uklina Choshes, Mishtai Mishem, Bechamin Avalo Ayidea Ar. So, copper utensils, you could use it with warm items, but you can't use it on fire. Because that'll diminish the utensil. Klei Kasef, silver utensils, Mishtai Mishem Bitson, Avalo Bechamin. You can use it with cold, you can use it with cold but not with hot, because that blackens it. Magrifos v'kardumos, shovels and axes. You could use it again with soft items but not with hard items, because we'll say obviously using a shovel or an axe against a hard item is going to diminish the object itself. Gold objects, so glass objects, lo yiga bahen ad sheyavo elio. Ultimately, again, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Now, I will say, Yankee Stamman actually asked this question after Shinnah. What does that mean? Don't touch it until Eliyah Hanavi comes. First of all, again, I will say, beforehand, in yesterday's daf, we also saw you're not obligated to go ahead and retain a lost object forever. After a certain point in time, you're allowed to keep it. So again, I think the Pasha Pshat is, the Gemara is using hyperbolic lashon to make a point over. In other words, there is no tipul, there is no involvement needed in the care for these objects. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. There's nothing to do with it. There's no care. And the Gemara is trying to make a point. Now, why is he trying to make a point? Because again, halacha l'maisa, if you were, so to speak, to utilize them in the course of trying to care for them, if something would be happen to that, you would be chayiv for that. Right? You'd be liable for that. The lashon of don't touch it until Mashiach comes is an exaggerated lashon there to make a point. There is absolutely no care that you need to exert for this utensil. All you need to do is keep it somewhere secure and leave it alone. All right, Keder Sh'amru ba'aveda, kach amru b'pikadon. I will say the same halachas that apply to finding and caring for a lost object also apply to caring for a pikadon, a deposit. The Gemara says, pikadon, maya videte gabe. I'll say, what are you talking about? By a pikadon, I will say, in other words, I'll say, when someone deposits something by me, I have one simple job. What's my job? Keep it safe. Keep it safe. Who says that as a pikadon that I have any obligation of maintenance of the object? To which the Gemara says, no, what's the case? No. What is the case? I will say, the case over here is where somebody deposited something with me and then the owner went overseas. So in that case, where the owner is gone for a prolonged amount of time, I do have an obligation to go ahead and maintain the object. Okay, interesting halacha. Fine, let's go weiter. Matzah sak, o kupa. V'chol davar shein darko lita reiza lo yito. So now we come to a very interesting sugi over here. So literally translated, if I find a sack or a utensil or anything that it is not my derech to pick up. So I will say, so now, we're going to be introduced to the concept ultimately of Eino Lefi Kavodo, a concept that, up until this entire time we've been speaking about the mitzvah of Hashavas Haveda. You find a lost object, you take it, you hold on to it. So we've been talking about how long do you have to hold on to it? What's your level of liability? How do you care for it? How do you maintain it? So we'll say, there's another halacha. What's the other halacha? There are some times where if you find a lost object, you are permitted to not take it. You're permitted to turn away. Why? Because there are some times where ultimately, again, the taking of a particular object, or the what we'll call it, the picking up of a lost object, is an affront to my personal dignity, is a diminution to my kavod, to my honor. And in those circumstances, I am allowed to go ahead and simply pass by the object and not pick it up. So here we go. So the Gemara says, immediately, first off, where do you know that concept? And I will say, it's interesting over here, because I would have thought there's a mitzvah Hashavas Haveda. The mitzvah Hashavas Haveda is when you encounter a lost object, take it, find the owner. I would have said, who cares about your personal dignity in that case? There's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah. Salach l'maisa, do the mitzvah. So where do we see that there's this concept of Eino Lefi Kavodo, that sometimes when finding and maintaining and giving back the lost object is an affront to my personal dignity, that I don't have to do it? So the Gemara says, interestingly enough, the Gemara says, so literally, again, you could turn away. Now, interestingly enough, the context of the pasuk is, if you see your friend's lost object, and you would be tempted to go ahead and turn away. So the Gemara says, return it. So the Torah is telling you, don't turn away. But the fact that it's written in the Torah as you turned away indicates to us that there are circumstances in life where you could turn away from a lost object. There are times where you could turn away, times where you can't turn away. Both say second wide line. So listen to both say, these are great cases. Let's say I'm a Kohen, I'm walking by, there's a lost object in a cemetery. So Rabbi say, obviously, again, as a Kohen, I can't go into the cemetery. Or Rabbi say, let's say again, there's a zakin. Rabbi say, now a zakin means not just an elder, but like someone distinguished. So to give a good example of this, right? So Reuven is a zakin, a Talmid Chacham, a zakin. He's walking down the road, and there's a sock. There's a sock on the road. So I will say, so bepashtos, it's not bakavadik for the zakin to pick up a sock, right, on the road to try to find the owner. So we'll say it's an interesting case. Or what happens? Let's say again, my time, what I do for a living is worth a lot of money. So we'll say, so what's going to happen? If I have to start with an aveda, it's going to lose time that I could be on my profession. And let's say, we'll say my profession, I charge a lot of money per hour, right? So Lamaisa, again, it's going to cost me personally to go ahead. In other words, the loss that I will incur from having to deal with the Aveda is more than the value of the Aveda itself. So these are all examples. So I'll say, so these are all examples of ultimately situations where I would be exempt from going ahead and dealing with the lost objects. Let's analyze these. So the Gemara says, so for which of these cases do you need the pasuk? So we're talking about a case where there's a lost object in the cemetery, and the Kohen comes across it. We'll say, I don't need a pasuk for that. Pshita. It is obvious that the Kohen does not have to go into the cemetery to retrieve the lost object. Why? Hai asay, v'hai lo sasay v'asay. We'll say, retrieving the lost object is a positive commandment, right? Hashev teshivim la'achecha. Right? Ultimately, again, there's a positive mitzvah to go and return lost objects. For a Kohen becoming tamei, Rabbi say, when a Kohen becomes tamei, there's a prohibition and a positive commandment. The positive commandment is Kidoshim Tiyu, and the prohibition, Rashi says, is Lenefesh Lo Yitama. So of course, again, V'lo Asi Aseh V'dachi Es Lo Saseh V'aseh. So obviously, a positive commandment of Hashavas Haveda cannot set aside the positive commandment and the prohibition of not becoming Tameh. Visu, furthermore, the Gemara says, Visu lo dachinan isura mikamei mamona. Furthermore, again, I will say we never set aside a prohibition in order to go out and fulfill a positive. Sorry, lo dachinan isura mikamei mamona. We never set aside a prohibition. Ultimately, again, before a case of mammon. So I don't need the pasuk for that case. Ella lishalo meruba mishel chavero. So I'll say. So what about the case ultimately again of where, let's say again, the loss I'm going to encounter, right? My loss in parnasa is going to be more than the value of the aveda. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav Nafka. Don't Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. I will say FS Amud Beis FS Ki Lo Yebecha Evyon. So it's actually very beautiful. The pasuk says FS Ki Lo Yebecha Evyon. It's talking about the brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us. One of the brachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us is that there will be no pauper. Right, be no poor. Now the way the pasuk is where it is, FS Ki Lo Yebecha Evyon. There will not be within you any poverty. What do you learn from that? Shelcha kodem l'shel kol adam. The Rebbe will say, my financial needs come before other people's financial needs. Chayecha kodmen. The idea will say that my needs, my life, comes before ultimately again the obligations that I have to others. The Rebbe will say, now what this means is, in a monetary sense, that I have a right to put my own financial needs in front of other people's financial needs. Which again is just a logical halacha of self-preservation. The same way that I can put my life in front of someone else's life, I can go to put my financial needs in front of someone else's needs. I will say now, again, just to qualify the scope of that, don't take from this, you see, I don't have to give tzedakah. I don't have to give tzedakah because my financial needs come. No, that's not what it means. A yid is always obligated to give tzedakah, and I will say again, I'm obligated to push myself for tzedakah, and I'm even obligated to give more than I'm comfortable with for tzedakah. That's what tzedakah is. Tzedakah is the one mitzvah where you're allowed to test HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you're allowed to say, Ribono Shel Olam, I'm going to push myself, and I'm confident that if I push myself to you, you're going to give it back to me. You can't do that with any other mitzvah, but you can absolutely do it with tzedakah. But what it means in a case like this, I will say, where again, there's a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, and if I do this, I'm going to suffer a loss that is greater than the value of the object, I'm not obligated to do that. That I'm not obligated to do. Halacha l'maisa again, if by doing the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, I'm going to lose time, which is money, not just time is money in general, but again, there is a quantifiable loss that is greater than the value of the lost object, I'm not obligated to do that. Rather, Rabbi say the pasuk itself is salamta, is coming to teach you the case of zakin ve'ein lefi kavodo. So if you have someone who is a Talmid Chacham, or someone who is a zakin, who has a certain stature, and the item that he found is beneath his dignity to pick up and to go ahead and return. So I remember I learned this sugi in yeshiva with Herschel Schachter, Shlita, and the example he gave the example, I'm remembering now, as I say. So the example is, you're walking down the street and you find a pair of underwear. That was his example. Now, I'm not sure if you should pick that up regardless, right? But Lamaisa, that was his example. Right? That in other words, to see someone who's a zaken pick up an object like that, it doesn't work. So you can fill in the blank with whatever your imagination, runs with. But Lamaisa, again, you have these cases where the lost object is simply something that is not, it's beneath the dignity of the finder. Okay, so what's the Gemara says weiter? Amar Rabba, Hikisha Chayiba. Now, here's what's interesting. As much as there are these cases of, let's say, what we call zakin ve'ein lefi kvodo. So a Talmid Chacham, a zakin, and picking up the object is beneath his dignity. So we'll listen to this. If, let's say again, hikisha. Let's say for example, it was I don't know, someone has a pet mouse that they lost, right? So lemaisa, it's not bakavad. Actually, it's not a good example. Let's say someone lost a donkey, right? I was trying to use just a moment using a donkey, right? And let's say for whatever the reason, it's in lefi kvodo for the zakin to go ahead and deal with the donkey. So what does he do? He gives it a little zetz. He gives it a little slap, right? And it starts running towards the owner. If he caused it to move, then he's responsible for it. In other words, we'll say the concept of zakin ve'ein lefi kvodo means like this: if it's beneath your dignity, then what? Don't get involved. The moment you get involved, then what? You're chayiv. So we'll say, by the way, another tremendous life yisod. There are certain circumstances in which you should not insert yourself. But if you do insert yourself, you're involved. You're involved. We'll say this is meisim b'chol yom, right? Where people like they see something like I know that I should not get involved in this, and then like they stick their pinky toe into it, and like or offer an opinion or offer a dracha, and then this and like you know what, I shouldn't get involved. Oh no, right? Once you involve, yes, there are certain things. Keep walking. Do not insert yourself into this. But once you do, you're in. And once you're in, do not try to extract yourself by saying, not my problem. So, zakein ve'en lefi kavodo, okay, you don't have to get involved. You give the animal a little zetz, and now you're in. You got involved, you're involved. Abaye Havi Yosef Kamei de Rabba. So I'll say Abaye was sitting in front of Rabba. Chazal Lahanach Izi de Kaimi. So I'll say he said that there were a bunch of goats, like a group of goats, a chevra of goats that apparently were lost. So what did he do? Shakal Kalav Shadav. He took a clod of earth and he threw it at them, causing them to move. Amarlei. So Rabbi said to him, "Echayvis buhu, right? Kum adrinu. Now you're responsible. You caused them to move. You got involved. Now that you got involved, ultimately again, go and find the owner. Incredible. Ibailu dakol hachzer b'sadvein dakol hachzer be'ir mau. So it's an interesting case over here. Let's say there's a zakein, but we'll just call him zakein, right? And he finds an object, and it'll be the kind of object that if he found in the fields, he would be obligated to return. But if he found it in the city, it would be beneath his dignity to go ahead and return it. So what's the chiluk between the field and the city? In the field, no one sees the zakein, and ultimately, again, in the city, people do. So let's use the sock, right? The pair of socks. So a zakein would not stop in the city to pick up a pair of socks. It would be beneath his dignity. But in the field where no one sees him, what's the big deal? So let's say, so now what's the shayla? So what's the halacha in such an item like that? Does he pick it up or doesn't he pick it up? So on one hand, we say, look, since halacha l'maisa, he wouldn't pick up this type of object in the city. Therefore, again, even in the field, he's exempt. Or we'll say maybe again, since in the field he would have picked it up. And since he would pick it up in the field, he should be chayiv to return it to the city as well. To which the Gemara says, Teku. Okay, we'll have to shelve that one. Amar Rava, kol Shebishalom machzir, so b'shal chavero nami machzir. The chol shebishalom parik v'toim b'shal chavero nami parik v'toim. So it's an interesting case over here. Any situation, I will say, literally again, any situation. Look at Rashi for just a moment over here. Yeah, okay, fine. So it's no Rashi. So I'll say anything that in your own object would be returned, you would have to do the same for your friend. Any situation where in your own circumstances, we'll say parik v'toim is prika te'ina, means the obligation to unload and help to reload an animal. B'shel chavera nami parik v'toim. Okay, so Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, listen to this, well, it's a great case. Rabbi Yossi, Hava ka'azil ba'archa, was traveling once on the road. Paga be'ahu chavra, he met a guy. Sahava dari pischa, the guy, the ofi. So I will say, ultimately again, so the guy was carrying, the guy, so again, just Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi is traveling on the road, he meets a guy, we'll just call him Guy. Guy is carrying a load of wood on his back. Okay, fine. So what happens? Osvinhu, v'kam mispach, amar le dalili. So now the guy took off his load to rest a little bit. Now he wanted to put back his load of wood back on his back. He turns to Rabbi Shmuel, and it's Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, can you help me reload? Like, can you help me put it back on my back? So we'll say, so now apparently Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi felt that this was Eino Lefi Kavodo. He felt that this, and I will say, I just want to point out, the dignity of a Talmud Chacham, right, the kavod of a Talmud Chacham is not his own. The kavod of a Talmud Chacham is the kavod HaTorah, is the kavod HaKadosh, which means that there are circumstances in which a Talmud Chacham is not permitted to forgive his kavod, because he's not forgiving his kavod, he's forgiving the kavod of Torah. He's forgiving the kavod of Kadosh Baruch Hu. So it's just important to understand this is not an ego thing. It's not an ego thing. This is a Talmud Chacham being conscious and aware that he is the ambassador of Torah, and as such has to conduct himself the same way that a Talmud Chacham is not permitted to walk around with a stain on his shirt, right? Is not permitted to dress a certain way. Is not permitted to conduct himself a certain way. Why? Because his kavod is not his kavod Torah. So we'll say, so now this guy asks Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, can you help me reload the wood on my back? Rabbi Yossi is like, this is probably not a good idea for me to do this. So I'll say, listen to what he does. It's incredible. Amarle, kama shavin. So Rabbi Yossi says, tell me, how much is the wood worth? Amarle, palga de zuzah, half a zuz. Rabbi Yossi says, yoivle, palga de zuzah. Rabbi Yossi gives him half a zuz. You know, let me just buy it off you. Right? Let me just buy it off you, and I'll buy it off you. That Rabbi say again. That way, Rabbi say, see, what's the beauty in this? The beauty in this is Rabbi Yossi doesn't want to say, "Oh, no, I can't help you." He doesn't want to do that. On the other hand, he also can't compromise the covet of being a Talmid Chacham. So he figures, you know what? Let me just buy it. What does he do after he buys it? It's a relatively small amount of money. The afkara, he made it hefker. He made it hefker. Rabbi said, now why does he make it hefker? He doesn't want to make it look like he's trying to benefit from this transaction, so he makes it hefker. So he said, now watch this. Hadar zachabahu. So Rabbi said, the guy says this is givaldik, right? So what does he do? He got a half a zuz for the wood. Now it's hefker. What does he do? The guy reacquires it. He goes back to Rabbi Shmuel Yossi. And he says to him, do me a favor, can you help me reload the wood on my back? So what does Rabbi Yossi do? Hadar yav lepalga. Rabbi Yossi says, you know what, let me buy it off you. Now, I just want to point out over here, right, the guy is not a bad guy. He just what? He doesn't know what's going on over here. So he figures, okay, right, he bought it, he's mafkir it. He'll say, tremendous Moshe Haskell. What's a tremendous Moshe Haskell? Don't expect people to know what your intentions are unless you tell them. Both say, how often does it happen in relationships? Again, whether it's a marriage, whether it's friends, I expect people to know what I'm thinking. Right? When one of my kids was little, it was actually my oldest daughter, when she was a little girl, she used to have this game. And the game was, tell me what I'm thinking. Say, Tati, tell me what I'm thinking. So I was like, so you know, the funny part is it's cute as a kid, but sometimes we become adults who play this same exact game as well. Tell me what I'm thinking. Tell me, you should, if you love me, you should know what I'm thinking. No, I love you very much. But the spirit of prophecy ended with the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Doesn't make a difference how much I love you, I still don't know what you're thinking. And I will say, the incredible part is, we so often get into interpersonal conflict because we think that people should know what my intentions are. So we'll say that's the most skill of this story. Rabbi Yossi has great intentions. I don't want to get involved in compromising the dignity, but I don't want to make a big thing. So let me just buy it, and I'll be mafkir because I don't want to benefit from it. Meanwhile, the guy is like, I have no idea what this rabbi is doing, but hey, I might as well chaperein over here. Like, this is fantastic. He's buying mafkir. This is fantastic. So second time around, he's ready to reacquire it again. So the Gemara says, Hadar Yav Lepal, go to Zuzah Afkara. So I'll say, so Rabbi Shmuel Silber does this again. He buys the wood off the guy and is mafkir it. Now this time, he sees the guy coming. He sees the guy coming to reacquire the wood. Amar le, lekule alma afkarincha, afkarinu, ulacha lo afkarinu. So Rabbi says to the guy, here's the way it works. This wood is hefker to everyone but you. No wood for you. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. First of all, umi have hefker ki agavna. Does that work? Does that work to make something hefker for everyone but one person? Vatnan beishamei omrim hefker la'aniyim hefker. So we'll say beishamei is like this: if you make something hefker only for the poor, it works. That's beishamei. Beis Hillel omrim eino hefker. Beis Hillel says no, it's not hefker. Achiu hefker la'aniyim u'la'ashirim kishmita. Beis Hillel says, that's not how the mechanism of hefker works. Hefker only works if you make it hefker for everyone. But if you just make it hefker for someone but not for everyone, it doesn't work. And I will say, obviously, we paskin like Beis Hillel. So hefker only works if it's hefker for everyone. So the Gemara says, really right. Rabbi Yossi made a hefker for everyone. I will say, it was hefker for everyone. So, but what was he doing? He was just saying words. In other words, Obviously, if this guy wanted to reacquire it, it would work. But he told him it's not hefker for you in order to kind of scare the guy off from going in and acquiring it. What's going on over here? Rabbi Shmuel says, but I don't understand. Why did Rabbi Shmuel have to do this whole thing? Let him just say, hey guy, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm a zakein, and it's Eino Lefi Kavodi. Just say it. It's halacha. Why do you have to go through this whole thing? Buying it, mafkir. It's hefker for everyone but you. Just say. The halacha is, I wish I could help you, but I'm a zakin, and it's Eino Lefi Kavodi. It's beneath my dignity. I mean, say it in a way that doesn't look arrogant, but lamaisa. But say it. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Rabbi Shmuel Yossi lifnim mishuras hadin huda. And I will say this is incredible. Rabbi Shmuel Yossi was going lifnim mishuras, and I will say this is absolutely incredible. What does it mean to go lifnim mishuras hadin? Lifnim mishuras hadin means to go above and beyond the expectations of halacha. So I will say there are expectations that we are obligated to meet, basic and core expectations. Lifnim mishuras hadin means in general in life, I don't want just to live up to expectations. I want to exceed expectations. That is called lifnim mishuras hadin. The Gemara quotes the pasuk. The Gemara says, "The Tanna of Yosef, v'odata lahem, ze beis chayehem." So we'll say, actually, before we get into this, I'll just mention. Actually, let's read the pasuk. So we'll say the pasuk that the Gemara is quoting over here is v'zartem eshem es achukim v'esatoros v'odatem lahem es haderech yelchu ba. Is Kadosh Baruch Hu talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. You shall instruct them on the way that they shall traverse, that they shall walk on. Ves hamaisa asher yasun. And the actions that they will perform. So the Gemara says, "Vodata lahem," you shall instruct them. Ze beis chayehem. We'll say ultimately again, what does that refer to? That refers to beis chayehem. That refers to teaching people parnasa. There's an obligation to learn a parnasa, to learn a way to support yourself. Es haderech, the pathway. Zu gemilas chasadim. This refers to chesed. Asher yelchu ba, that they should walk on. Ze bikar cholim. This refers to visiting the sick. Ba zokvura. That refers to burial. That's hamaisa, the action. Zehadin. This ultimately again refers to judgment. Asher yasun zulifnim mishuras hadin. This refers to going above and beyond. So we'll have to see. The Gemara is going to darshan that brisa a little bit more tomorrow. But I will say, so we'll get into that more tomorrow. But Lamaisa, this concept ultimately of lifnim mishuras and going above and beyond. I'll just mention to Ramchal. Rosh Chaim Mesilas Yesharim says, I will say, he speaks about chasidus. Chasidus. What does it mean to be a chassid? So the Rebbe says, a tzaddik is someone who lives up to expectations, right? David Schwartz knows, right? A tzaddik is someone who lives up to expectations. A chassid is someone who exceeds expectations. A chassid is someone who says, I know what the Ribbon Shalom wants of me, what he expects of me. Now that I understand that, I could do more. So it says, according to Ramchal, ultimately a chassid is someone who lives lifnim mishuras hadin. So we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Emirat Hashem with this Gemara a little bit more. I will say also just important announcement. We sent out from the shul yesterday about the campaign to write 180,000 letters. For, not us, Claudia, so I'll write 180,000 letters to mark the 180th day of captivity of the hostages of the war. There are boxes. The link went out. You could do it online. If you want to do a physical copy, again, they're right here in the front. There's one basket of blank letters. You could just literally, it takes 20 seconds to sign your name, to write your address. If you've done it online, fantastic. If you haven't done it online, take it. And I would urge you, I'll say again, this is not like a one per household thing. Everyone could sign. So even if you want, you could take a couple of copies home. Every member of your household should be signing these letters. Feel free. We're going to be bringing them, Emirat Hashem, literally physically bringing them to Washington, D.C., Emirat Hashem this coming Wednesday. Please participate in this important mitzvah. I'll say, shkoyach. Just the shkoyach for an incredible week of learning, incredible week of Gemara. Schus to do this with all of you. Halalei Kadosh Baruch Hu should give us many more weeks together. Shkoyach. And Rabbi Shalom Aleichem. Great to see you. Give me one second, let me just shut this off.